Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Dr. Kennedy Podcast. The Dr. Kennedy Podcast is sponsored by the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Development. That's the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Developments. And folks, we have a treat here today. We have a fellow East Orange native. I'm from East Orange, he's from East Orange. That's amazing right there, the two brothers from East Orange.
Yeah, that's for sure.
With two PhDs can sit back and just rap. Mr. Hendricks, how you doing? Dr. Hendricks, excuse me. Dr. Hendricks, how you doing?
Man, it's good. I'm doing good. It's good to talk to you, but it's right, coming from where we come from, man, it's sort of amazing, brother.
It's amazing. That's what this is about. The people tell, it was an amazing little town. And, we get into, why that is, because it's an incredible story that I don't think people really quite get. And I keep wanting to get it out there. So thank you for doing the interview and appreciate you, because I know you're a busy man. And I didn't even get the chance to do justice to your background. I started the introduction and I wasn't doing it justice. I just stopped. I said, I'm not. I said, let him do it. So could you tell the folks, what's the genesis of your educational background, where you come from, that kind of, just to kick us off.
Yeah, I have a BA from Rutgers, and
Okay.
I must say, when I was in East Orange High, man, it's funny, I was vice president of the student council, man, president of the Black Student Union, and I graduated in the bottom half of my class.
It's all about networking, brother. It's all about networking.
Yeah, so despite my teachers, man, pushing me, but I finally got it together, man, and I went to Rider College for a couple of years and essentially flunked out, but I went back when I got serious. I was able to get back into Rutgers Newark. I got in because they were taking everybody in those days, right? And then I ended up actually, strangely enough, I did real well when I went back. I ended up like in that first wave of Wall Street when they were really hiring, Black folks. I guess EEO was pushing them, and I started at E.F. Hutton. I spent about 8 years, a couple firms on Wall Street, man, and then I left. I actually came back to East Orange to be acting director of economic development, man, because I wanted to. I felt like I wanted to make I needed to make a contribution, but I also wanted to keep my hand in sort of the glamour and the dynamism of finance.
Right.
But at my father's funeral, I speaking at his funeral, and man, something said, wow, brother, you this is your site of struggle, the church. Now, I've never been a real churchianity type guy, and I wasn't interested in ministry. But I ended up going to Princeton Seminary because I thought, kicking and screaming, that I was supposed to go into the pulpit ministry, and kicking and screaming because I wanted no parts of it. Thank the Lord, I had a Black professor, Clarice Martin, who realized I had gifts of scholarship. She pushed me to apply for a PhD. I graduated with honors from Princeton Seminary. So I got into Princeton University in their religion department, which I did not know was the top religion department and the hardest to get in at the time. I had no idea. If I wouldn't have applied.
Right.
But I hooked up with some folk. Cornel West was there at the time, and Michael Dyson was a student, and worked it out so I could go there, man. So I did a PhD in religions in late antiquity, early Christianity, form of Judaism, and all that. And I embarked on a career in academia, and I was invited to be president of Payne Theological Seminary, the oldest theological seminary, Black theological seminary in the country, while I was still an assistant professor, which was, really sort of a blessing, man. And then when I left there, I came back this way, and now I'm at Columbia University, and I'm a visiting professor at Union Seminary, and I'm trying to do what I can do,
Well, that's beautiful, man. That's a beautiful back. I know how hard that is, kind of having an academic career myself. You're being very humble. And so we appreciate that you're willing, to share your knowledge. So we have so much to talk about. I want to get into the heavy stuff later on, but I just want to get folks to know you as a person first. So can you talk about, you mentioned a little bit about your father, but maybe combine it. Can you talk about, how your family influenced you, how the town of East Orange, growing up as a child in East Orange, how did that influence you as a Black young man, and maybe how did that still imprint on you today?
Yeah, well, I was born in Farmville, Virginia, man. My family migrated when I was little, man. And Farmville, Virginia is in Prince Edward County, where they closed the schools for 5 years rather than desegregate. Give an idea of my roots. I always like say I was like born in struggle,
Yeah.
So we came north to Newark first, and came East Orange, and my parents were man, I had a wonderful family, very supportive. My father was a brick mason. My mother was an artist, a very gifted artist.
Mhm.
She worked as a secretary, and growing up in East Orange, man, was just it was amazing. It's because like I grew up on the street Stockton Place, which is one block. It's cut off by William Street and Park Avenue, and man, it was like sort of idyllic. I got to tell you. But, I mean, we were like a little neighborhood unto ourselves, and we were in and out of each other's houses, man. There were a lot of kids. It was the kind of neighborhood where you better not mess up because you get a whipping out by whoever saw it, and then you get a whipping when you got home, and there was this real sense of community, man. And I got, and I mean, went through Stockton School, Kentop and Stockton School, Lincoln School, and got a good formative education, man, because I still remember some stuff that I was taught back then in grade school, it impacted on me. And so it was, and then it was like the best of all worlds in that, down the neighborhood where I grew up was sort of rough, down the way, but up
We're gonna talk about the up the way, down the way.
yeah. But we got, but I got like both sides, man. And
Right.
it was wonderful. And then, and East Orange High was just just wonderful days, man. What can I tell you?
Yeah,
And,
you went
and
through the
as
glory years.
many of us are still tight. We and people, my wife asked me, what is this stuff about East Orange? All this stuff. I never see anything like it, man. But it's unique,
Right. Yeah, you went through the glory days. You guys were good in football, basketball.
Yeah.
Did you play any
Yeah.
sports in high school?
I got out in 71. No, I played football, JV football, man, but it wasn't, my heart wasn't in it, man. Really, I only wanted to play football because I know football players got the girls, man.
Right.
So my heart wasn't in it. My sport was martial arts. I ended up becoming a competitive martial artist, and that was more my thing.
So you mentioned this up the way, down the way, and it's kind of a cultural thing. So I was talking to Kim Mack. He was saying how the Oval at that time, which was down the way,
Yeah.
it was like a cultural experience going to the Oval at night. Did you go down there at night? Did you experience any of that stuff?
Yeah, I spent some time down the Oval, but Kenny and Mac them a little few years ahead of me. I got out 71. The Oval had gotten a little bit rough.
A little rough back, okay.
So I was I spent, of course I spent time there. We all spent time there, but I will tell you, I remember vaguely, I must have been about 5, 6 years old, my father taking me when they still had the grandstand in the Oval, taking me to see the Negro League, man.
Right.
Negro League baseball players. That's how deep East Orange is, man.
Right. I know people tell me about that. Yes, that's the culture is unbelievable. So, and you mentioned that one of the things I think is interesting, because I tell friends today that I still have friends from kindergarten.
Yeah.
From East Orange. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know all my boys from kindergarten. We still tight.
Yeah. What part of town were you in? Did you grow up in?
I grew up the way by Washington School.
Right, yeah.
And my father was a principal in East Orange. My father was a principal of Columbia on Springfield or Springdale right there.
Yeah, what was his name, man?
Mr. Henry Daniels.
Yeah, I remember Mr. Daniels. Yeah, man. Cool.
That's my father. Yeah, my father cleaned up that area of going down there towards the train station there, and Columbia Park was rough back then. And he was a turnaround specialist. In fact, my pops was one of the first Black principals in New Jersey.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of history, and trying to kind of get that out there. But yeah, but that whole strip when he first went there, it was rough.
Yeah. I spent more time at Columbian Park actually than I did at the Oval. Right. I got tired of fighting at the Oval, man.
Yeah, that was my pops, and he used to take me to the gym and all that. So I knew everybody down at Columbia. That was kind of my second home,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So let's So let's kind of, I kind of saw you have your books out there. You do a lot of public speaking. And, you kind of mentioned you have this Wall Street background, which I really find fascinating. You kind of mentioned that you had to struggle. So can you talk about, capitalism a little bit? What are some of the ills of it? And do you believe that capitalism can kind of still be a pathway for Black Americans to get to prosperity or all the milk and honey?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we're in a capitalist order, so we need to take advantage of as much as we can, right, without violating our own principles, man. But I think that for all that the technological advances we've seen through and health advances and so forth we've seen through capitalism, I see it as a very deleterious form of political economy, and I'll say up front, I am a democratic socialist, but I'm really more in the mold of the Black Christian socialist, man, because as you know, capitalism is values profits over people, right?
Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, we have socialism in America. Um, we socialize the debts and the losses of corporations, right?
Yeah.
Make society pay for them. But the little people, man, we have to, like Martin Luther King says, we're subjected to robust capitalism. So no, man, I think capitalism is little by little, like every other form of political economy before it, it's bound to die, because corporations are are sociopathic, man. Like, they don't give a damn. They don't care about anything, and
Right.
and we're at the point where folk are really starting to acknowledge that we have to care more about the people and their needs. Like I said in one of my books, we have to treat people's needs as holy. Capitalism doesn't give a damn. So yeah, that's where I stand on that whole question.
That's fascinating. Well, we kind of leading that anyway, because the pandemic has basically reset our values.
Yes.
And we passed 1.9 trillion. So
yeah, exactly. And that's as much of a paradigm shift almost as the New Deal.
Right. Yes.
In fact, Wall Street Journal was saying that just today. So
Yes.
we got to see what happens.
It's a big number. I was listening to a couple of economists talk on TV, and they were saying that, well, some criticized because it wasn't targeted. It's kind of like a blank check on a lot of things. It wasn't like the only thing that was really covered specifically was childcare. Could have gone into detail, let's say education, could have gone some education reform, infrastructure, those kind of specifics. And so, but we'll see. But some were saying that the number should be bigger in terms of 4 trillion. And, because probably this is not the first check. There's going to be another check cut after this. So, so if you were to think of some areas of reform, I kind of, my own views is that, we know there's a healthcare gap, wealth gap. What areas of reform would you like to see specifically target to help minorities in our community?
That's interesting. Yeah, that is really, what I'd like to see more, and maybe that's, I mean, the government can have a hand in it, but I'd like to see more like cooperatives, workers' cooperatives, man, and workers' the WSDEs, the workers' designated enterprises, I think. And, I think that as long as we are dependent upon big capital,
right,
that we'll never, we can only get but so far. I do believe, like with Martin Luther King, I believe that there should be a minimum income for everyone in America. That could, I mean, that could mean like a guaranteed, either a guaranteed job for those who can work and those who can't, a basic income, and I think that's very important for Black folk, particularly.
It's amazing how far we come. As you're saying, just 5 years ago, a conversation like this would be seen as being, far-fetched or, being radical. And now it's pretty common stream that, that we need to do something, that the status quo is not going to work. I'm a firm believer like you that status quo capitalism will not work in terms of, fulfilling our needs in our Black communities. But I just started doing some reading, like philosophers like Du Bois, King, Malcolm X, and and you're an expert in these areas. I really come to you as a student. So when we think of those great minds and how they might think about the day, maybe talk a little bit about Du Bois and some of the things that he espoused that might apply today. Or I give you free rein just to run with it, because I think you probably have something to think about in that area.
Yeah, I think Du Bois, though he joined the Communist Party right before he left, for Ghana, left America for good. I think Du Bois was more of a democratic socialist, and I think Du Bois would be interested in the kind of things that we're talking about, the kinds of things that Martin Luther King talked about, because we want to maintain a semblance. Well, we want to maintain as much democracy as we can, right? So, so any kind of socialism we have would have to come through that way. And so, I think, of course, they'd want universal health coverage, right? A universal basic minimum income, again, full employment. I think those are kind of that Du Bois, Du Bois was one. And also Du Bois was a real strong advocate for unions. I know you know that. He was a very strong advocate for unions. And unions are ultimately, I think, the only are the strongest and much more potentially strong bulwark against the depredations of capitalism, right? So I think all those figures you mentioned, I think they all would be on one accord with those kinds of measures.
Yeah. So I was reading about Du Bois and this whole idea of double consciousness, and we are one of the few races that have to face this, that we have to think about ourselves in the eyes of our oppressor. And, that's, to me, that's really profound in terms of what that means for Black youth, because when we talk about our youth, we were kind of shielded because East Orange was so strong as we grew up. We were kind of shielded from it. Then as we left the nest, we got exposed to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So today's youth, because of the internet, so they might get exposed to it a little bit earlier. So what could you kind of speak of, how we were protected, what that meant for you in terms of maybe building your confidence, and then what some of the youth may be lacking today in terms of our Black youth?
Interesting, man. East Orange was like the most, at the highest percentage of Black folks of any sizable city other than East St. Louis when I was coming.
Right.
And so, man, I was so you and I both, we were used to being ensconced in this Black community, man, in which things were a certain way. Look, man, we could cuss each other out and for fun.
Right. That's right.
And so we were used to doing things a certain way. And also, we didn't grow up in a hardcore ghetto, but it wasn't the softest environment either, right?
That's right.
So when I got out in the world, it was sort of strange. And like working on Wall Street, man, it was so strange culturally. I was like, damn, everyone's so thin-skinned, man. I don't get it.
And funny.
Yeah, the same in academia, man. I don't know, you might have experienced that too. And and also it was so strange to not have that womb of Black folks and Black culture and affirmation around you all the time, right?
That's right.
I had to get used to not, used to being invisible at times, man. And then I remember a guy named Stu. I think we were E.F. Hutton, and we were desk partners. And one day he said to me, he said, Obery, I got to tell you, you talk more about fighting than anybody I ever met. I said, wow. that you know what I'm talking about, man. It was like, it was just part of what we were about. And it's sort of crazy. I remember that they would bring people like you and me. Remember, they bring folk back who had attained some measure of success out in the world. They bring them back to school.
Oh yeah.
to an assembly. And I remember, man, we used to sit there and nudge and say, yeah, but can he fight though? That was that down the way mentality, man. So
yeah.
So I had a lot
of. He looked soft, right? That's what we say. He looked kind of soft, right?
Yeah, right, man. I had a lot of adjusting to do, brother. When I ran into a lot of races, my first day, like I said, I started for my first day, my very first day. They were introducing me to guys in the office. They were all guys, I think, and one guy, I never forget his name. I'll call his name, David Stahl, little short Jewish guy, came to me and shook my hand. Obery, hey man, so glad to have you. Boy, man, what a storm it was today, man. And damn, I got wet, my shoes got all muddy. How about a shoe shine?
What?
My first day, man, I was so taken aback. I mean, and hurt, right?
Yeah.
And then, man, another guy picked up on it, and I used to hear this all the time. And see, I had a little daughter at the time. She was a baby, and they didn't want to say anyway. So, man, I had to be real careful. I'd have gotten blackballed. I wanted to punch these guys out.
Right.
But I'd be careful. And so it was uncomfortable. I mean, I dealt with it eventually. I mean, I had to step to the guy. We had to have a long nose-to-nose conversation, but it was the kind of thing I never had to experience growing up, man. I saw it on TV. So it was tough, man. It was tough,
Yeah, I know.
I'm glad to have had that experience. I'm glad to have had that experience because it gave me some mental toughness,
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject there, how mental toughness went a long way. But it's kind of interesting. You picked up this thing of, I kind of wrote this book, my autobiography, and I talk about being invisible in that book because, basically having to, not so much being invisible, but basically having to, adapt to the culture and, accept some things that morally you might not really want to accept, but if you want to get ahead, you have to, and, like you're saying, conversation, people say something, you have to look the other way.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure a lot of Black men have had those conversations, so it's kind of interesting that, and then I went through higher ed just like you, and now I got this your hour. I could do an hour of my experiences, but, that's also in terms of how higher ed has some warts also, so.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, man. I can tell you, my experience at Princeton University in the graduate school was some of the best years of my life. Oddly enough, most people can't say that about their graduate time, but I also, man, I had to deal with a lot of insult outside of that, my department as well,
right.
Man. It was you know what I'm talking about, man. It was
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of when you're in your own silo, your day to day is fine, but if you go outside that to the larger university, that's where the sharks are. It's like, and promotion and tenure. I rose to be a full professor, but let me tell you, there was a battle, in terms of some of the things that reviewers pick for your scholarship. There's some things that are said, about cherry picking or. Somebody's a real scholar or not a real scholar,
Yeah. No, brother. I mean, a lot of people don't understand what it means when you say that you've risen to full professor, man. They have no idea, what all that entails. I mean, that's really a big deal, man. I mean, for us, it's an extraordinary deal, man. I never had to stand for tenure because I went from assistant professor to a president of this small school, but nonetheless, they granted me tenure. That's part of my deal. So I ended up never having to stand for tenure. So I escaped that, but I've heard the horror stories, the insult, and
it's
all
interesting,
the questioning of this, that.
But it's all kind of America's built on competition, and this whole thing, whether it's saying we look at competition among the races for jobs or whatever it is that you know, there's always a game with inside the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are kind of some of the soft skills that maybe, you know, we don't have a network like other groups have networks to kind of, you know, pass down these things and soften them, blow, and all those kind of things. Because when you're talking about the Jewish, there's a network, strong network, Korean strong. You're in New York City, strong economic networks, Irish strong, and we still have not gotten an idea that we need the network. I don't think. You know, what you feel about that?
Well, you know, yeah, I think you're right, man. You know, integration, you know, pride integration, we didn't have a choice, right?
Right.
And but integration, man, has thrown us a kilter, and I don't know, man. You're right. We don't have the kind of solidarity, but it goes back so far. America's done so much to keep us divided, you know. I think we've never gotten over that. But where are you? What part of the country are you in?
I'm in Florida right now, but I still have the house in East Orange, and so I split time between East Orange and Florida. So I'll be back up in Jersey probably end of May. I'll come back up.
Holler at me, man, and I'm riding to New York City. You know, maybe we can get together.
I appreciate that, yeah, because man, I can learn a lot from you. Because I'm now, you know, I always wanted to get more into this area that we talk about, you know, scholarly, but never had the time, you know, during my academic career. But now I'm trying to just do the background research and understand. That's kind of what all this is here. And so, you know, another area that one of my neighbors, actually was my neighbor when I was living in Richmond, was Roscoe Cooper. I don't know if you know Roscoe Cooper.
I don't.
But he's a well-known pastor in Richmond. And, you know, we always have, you know, talk about the Black church and things like that. So, what do you think about, you know, the role of the Black church as an institution? Kind of has to be, you know, because of the vacuum, it needs to be a little bit of everything. And so, you know, it's the bank, it's the church, it's the daycare. And one of the things I'm saying that we as a people have to have some type of institutional development. So what do you think of that as the Black church and maybe being the anchor, being able to spin these things out? Maybe that's kind of my idea, maybe how it should work. How do you think it should work?
It could work like that, but it doesn't.
Right.
You know, I mean, the Black church, like white churches, is you know, Black churches are so concerned about institutional maintenance, you know, that I mean, if they build up a certain critical mass of people and resources, so often they use the resources to build a new church, a bigger church or something, you know. So, I mean, and there are some, of course, notable exceptions. There are a number of them, but I mean, some of my colleagues, some well-known preachers that names that you would know, we talk about the Black church has always been on the forefront of Black liberation and progress. And I have to disagree, man. That has not always been, it's has not been the case. It's been a minority of churches that have done that. You know, an example, when Martin Luther King was trying to get support for the Poor People's Campaign, he called a minister of 100 and some odd pastors in Virginia to get together to talk about it. And man, I'm not even gonna ask you to guess how many folks showed up because you would never get it right. Because no, not one, zero. You know, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, man. I think it'd be a little different today, but you know, we're talking about billions of dollars coming through the church, and look what's going on. Churches all throughout our communities, but still we have all this pathology, you know. Pastors, and I don't want to demonize pastors. I mean, just like in every profession, you know, they're trifling folks, but you know, mainstream, I mean, Christianity presents itself as being more concerned about over yonder than on earth, right? And something ever bought into it. So I guess what I'm saying is, we have, I mean, I look at the churches and Black churches as really a part of not only of Christianity, but churchianity, a culture that is concerned about churches and talks about saving souls and all that, and they don't seem to pay enough attention to what the biblical prophets talked about, you know, speaking truth to power, and And when Jesus gave his like a manifesto in Luke 4, it said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor." Well, what's good news to the poor, man? It's that, the institutions and the relationships and laws and policies, whatever, that make them poor and keep them poor, that they'll be changed. So what does that say? That says institutional, structural change. Well, most churches don't have any vision of structural change in this country. A lot of preachers barely read the newspaper, man, to stay up with what's going on, So, I mean, it has great potential, and church is my site of struggle, SITE, site of struggle, but and so I'm not giving up on it, but as of now, it's not as much happening as should be by any stretch,
Wow, wow. You just said that's powerful, because structural change is because of, as you kind of mentioned, because of technological change. There's going to be massive structural change probably over the next couple of decades. That just look what we envisioned from the '60s to now, and what that's meant for societies have to be mobile and creative, and certain institutions have adapted with that. And so it's going to be interesting going forward in the future if we're going to be able to jump the hurdle, in our community, or are we going to be left behind?
Yeah. Well, we better be careful, man, because I know in your work you look at effects of automation, man, and how how so many jobs and industries are changing, man, and how the educational system is not keeping up by training folks for them.
Right.
And so we're going to be in bad shape if we're not more attentive, and diligent.
Right. It's going to be interesting. So let me throw another name out there, Dr. William Barber. So he's kind of, resurrected this idea of the Poor People's Campaign. So could you maybe talk about the original Poor People's Campaign, what that intent was, and the new one, and are the two, philosophies the same, or are they shifted a little bit?
No, I don't think they are. I think there are some differences. Let me say, William Barber, the brother is, if there is a successor to Martin Luther King, morally and in terms of vision and all that, I would say that Barber is. I have total respect for him. And I know the brother to some extent, man. He's a very good brother. But, King was a democratic socialist. He had a democratic socialist vision, and his Poor People's Campaign was not, he said it wasn't just about changing policies. He wanted to change structures. He wanted to change, as he said, the architecture of society, right? Barber's campaign, Poor People's Campaign, is not talking about that, is not talking about structural change in the same sense. They're really talking about making existing policies more beneficial to people, and to innovate with additional, some new policies. But we don't hear a critique of capitalism, writ large, with Barber, which is not a criticism, it's just an observation. What he's doing is very, very, very important. He can't do everything, but I look for in the future to him, to the campaign, becoming more critical of the capitalist political economy.
Let's talk about the next movement. It's kind of the movement that the TV is grabbing, which is Black Lives Matter, and what the mainstream media is doing with it. And we now have they're picking the jurors for the George Floyd case and so forth. So first, what do you think of the movement? What would you like to see? And do you see anything that it may need improvement in?
Yeah, man, I think that it's Black Lives Matter. When you think about it, these handful of young folk going back several years, I guess when Trayvon Martin was killed, man, had a handful of Black folks, they had Black Lives Matter, folks talking about Black Lives Matter all over the world, man, in Japan and China and all that.
Right.
It's extraordinary, just unbelievable. And they took a moral stand. I think it's a great movement. I think one of its what it is a strength, but also a weakness. And philosophically, it's a strength that they don't believe in top-down leadership, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's also a weakness because I don't know that it's always as focused as it can be, right? But they've made tremendous strides in the world. I think it's time for a coherent message, a more coherent message, because be, because many critics are picking up on this, that, and the other, because we have different voices speaking at times. Right. And I guess all I'm saying is I think that they could be, the movement could be, the movement's making great changes. I think it could be more, even more effective if there was a little more coordination, I guess is what I'm saying. Because there's all kinds of different groups. Because the Black Lives Matter movement, though, I mean, they are essentially. I talked to a young brother in Florida, Philip Agnew, the Dream Defenders. Man, they lean toward democratic socialism, right? And they were studying Martin Luther King. I'd like to see more coordination. But I will say this: the first Black Lives Matter convocation gathering they had in Cleveland several years ago, I went to it, man. I stuck out like a sore thumb because I was one of the oldest people there. But man, it was astounding the kinds of things these young people are talking about and delving into intellectually, and the breadth of what they're talking about. They had all kinds of workshops and discussions, and then what also was so heartening is they offer a safe place for everybody. They were and hear me out because it might sound a little funny at first, but they were like big, chubby, brothers who are trans brothers, right? Wearing mini skirts, who would have been laughed at and made fun of and maybe beat up out in the street. But in this space, man, you can see they felt safe, man, and to the point that some of them I was watching, they were so giddy, man. It's like an affirming place for young people. Yeah, man, it's really beautiful. The book hasn't been written yet on all the beauty in this movement. It will be, but it hasn't been written yet. It's an extraordinary movement,
Wow. That's interesting that, you went to the Cleveland conference, showed your dedication, but the fact that, when you're there, you kind of see the energy that these people have. That's what you were speaking to, is that the young folks, that they really bring the energy and want to have they really want to have structural change.
Yeah. They're asking questions, man. Which a lot of these organizations aren't asking questions.
Right.
And they have a vision, by the way, which is what churches don't have. Right. You ask them, what kind of political economy do you think would be best for our people? What is your vision? They don't have a vision, man. Their vision is heaven, I guess. Right. Or we want to get rid of police brutality and those things, which are important. But as I know, we need to look beyond that.
Right.
To try to have some sense of where we're really going ultimately.
Absolutely. It's interesting because a lot of young folks are authentic. I mean, and this millennial, I'm back into teaching a little bit, and it's interesting to see young folks because you talk about millennials and Gen Xers, and they think very differently. That we were taught to respect authority.
Mm-hmm.
They will question. They will go around these new industries like Uber, Airbnb. They are disruptors. And I respect that. So but the question was, what's the direction? I'm not so sure that it's a better way, because it's still based on materialism and so forth. And what's the purpose? And like you mentioned, maybe some of this other organization will find a way to take this young energy and focus on something more structurally beneficial.
Yeah.
I don't know what's your deal with young folks at Columbia? What are you seeing?
Yeah. Well, I must say, I haven't seen any of them, for a semester and a half because of COVID.
Okay, you've been doing research.
But there are some young people who are extremely motivated, man. And here's an example, man. There's a professor who has a class on. She teaches a class on essentially on social activism. And one day Jesse Jackson was in. I asked if she wanted me to bring him to her class. These young people really didn't know anything much about Jesse Jackson. But when he got through talking, sharing a vision, and sharing a real activist vision and what the possibilities are, man, they were ready to to go through the roof. They're so motivated. They need some guidance.
Right.
But they're not as motivated as we were in the 60s. I grew up in the Black nationalist movement, and and then they had SDS for the whites. We don't have that same kind of motivation, no. But there's a cadre. There are a lot of folk who demonstrate for Black Lives Matter. A lot of white students. So I can't complain.
It was fun. I saw a picture of you in Newark at the Newark riots when I was doing my little research on you. There's a picture of you. I had to find that picture, see if I can find it for you. But I think it's a picture of you. I don't know, but I think you were going down there to, I don't know, discuss or anything. But do you remember that picture? You mentioned?
No, I don't, man. Do
you remember that time period though? The North riots and all that?
Yeah. Well, I was on I stayed on the outskirts of the riots. I didn't really get involved until after the riots, like so many, so many folks. Baraka, took his beating, and the black community started waking up. I came in, after that,
right.
After the riot. That sort of was a consciousness raising thing for me and so many others.
Yeah. Well, let me go in another direction, because I when I was doing some of my coursework in econ, and I had to write a paper. I wrote a paper on usury, the Bible, what the Bible says about usury. And it was the first time I was exposed to the Bible actually has a lot of economics in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. I was just, it talks about just price and all these things in the Bible. And so what do you think about, what can you say about the Bible in terms of the ethics of the Bible and what it says about how it should be implemented in general? And maybe you're talking about the Quran, because I started dabbling in that too. I can't even go there, but you might be able to talk. I can't talk on it, but I can talk on the Bible. I've been that far.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at economics and the Quran. I'll be honest. So I wouldn't want to try to speak on that. It's been many years. Okay. But in terms of Bible, you're right. Like I hear conservatives talk about that, and conservative Christians about their anti-regulation and all that. Hey man, as you know, they're rudimentary, market regulations throughout the books of Moses, man, and like you said, just measures, coming up with just measures and all that, and so yeah, in my last book, it's called the Universe Bends Toward Justice. I have a couple chapters in there where I deal with economics in the Bible, man, and the vision of the Bible is one. First of all, the main ethic of the Bible is justice. And without going through a long thing, it's egalitarian justice. And you can, epitomize it in love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you want the same thing for your neighbor as yourself, that's egalitarian, right? That's egalitarian justice, without taking it farther. So the vision of the Bible, biblical ethics lean more toward a democratic socialist vision than a capitalist vision. It's not capitalist or democrat socialist, but it leans more toward it. And And building on this whole notion of egalitarian justice, that includes economic justice. Well, then that says all kinds of stuff, man. I mean, but for one thing, it does talk about the importance of market regulations. For one thing, there should be, robust market regulations. It speaks against usury. I think I don't know that we can do without usury. What we can do without unjust usury, and it also speaks about government. It talks about the role of government is to look out for the poorest. One of the responsibilities of government, we're told repeatedly, is that it must look out for the poorest and the weakest of society, even though libertarians, in the right wing, they say just the opposite. So that means we have to have a government that is geared toward and that that judges itself by how well it does by those in need, not by how well it does by those who are not in need. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like different countries have different social measures like happiness, some broad things in terms of, that's an extreme example. But yeah, it shouldn't be just based on the stock market.
Yeah, and so like talk about GDP, man. Well, GDP doesn't measure anybody's well-being.
That's right.
Right. I mean, if a whole lot of people die and a whole lot of caskets are built, that makes GDP go up, right? Well, that doesn't mean our lives are any better. So, So economics in the Bible. But I think that if we look at the fact that the primary and the most important ethic in the Bible that shows up more than anything else in the Bible, 400 some odd times, is justice, and that everything has to be go through we judge our policies and in our society, we judge them by whether they are consistent with egalitarian justice, and we prescribe the ones we write to be in tune with egalitarian justice. I think that's a very important economic measure to use and foundation to use, and that it would be a lot more beneficial to life more people.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's some broader. That's a very fascinating point. That it's amazing. I think I hear all these talking heads on TV, and they're not even thinking as broadly as we say in terms of broadening discussion to have some value to discussion, and I don't think they're educated enough. That's my point. That they just are narrowly, they're spoon fed, and they're just, garbage in, garbage out. And so for something like this, well, why are we not just looking at broader measures of, mankind, basically? It's really that simple.
Well, brother, it's largely ideological Christianity, man. It's all about their interests, man. What is sacred is what serves their interests, and they ignore the rest. How could they support, a piece of trash like Donald Trump, who's so unchristian, man? You can't get more unchristian, but they hold him up in some quarters, and I'm talking about a lot of people hold him up as a messiah. Literally, they use that term. One person, Sheldon Adelson, who just died, the rich Las Vegas casino guy. His wife said that there should be a book added to the Bible called the Book of Trump. That's how sick those people are, man.
I'm down in Florida, man. This is Trump country, so I see it every day. It's rough down here.
I bet.
Man, and I don't want to give trucks a bad name, but I never seen so many big wheel trucks. Okay, and I rode through Mississippi one time, and I stopped this little 7-Eleven thing, man. And I could just tell the eyes on my back of the truck. I said, "Let me get in my car and get moving."
Man, it's tough, brother. It's tough.
It's still out there. I joke about it, but as a Black man, you still have to be cognizant of your surroundings and we talk about the double consciousness. These are, for our young folks, they never know when they're going to be hit with this stuff. And,
That's the truth, man.
when's the next shooting going to come, or the next odd event? So it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we need to kind of, you've been gracious with your time, but I want to end on a light note. So I want to come back to kind of semi-light and then go to light, because I think you got a great personality. I think folks rarely see the side of you. They probably, your students do, but when you're on the speaking thing, you gotta bring your message. So I hope you appreciate the chance to show some different dimensions. So, what are some books that you're reading, materials you think are important for us to educate ourselves? Maybe you want to talk about one of your books you think is interesting that might have a message for us, or something that the audience might enjoy.
Well, right now I'm reading, I just started reading a book by Heather McGhee. What is the title of that book? It just came out. Thank God for Amazon. Just give me a minute because I think it's important. Yeah, name of her book is The Sum of Us, man. The subtitle is What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. It's a great book, and she writes it so well, man. I mean, it's a kind of book that, man, you and I are tuned to these things, but I'm reading and I just have begun, and she's saying things I hadn't even thought of, man. I'm reading that. I have a book coming out in July that is called Christians Against Christianity, How Right-Wing Evangelicals Are Destroying Our Nation and Our Faith. And man, like I put on pointy-toe shoes to kick behind this butt in this book, brother. Okay. I mean, I call names and everything, man, because it's a travesty, man. They are, and they're generating up so much hatred and madness in this country. We got to fight back because we're really at war. They declared war on us. Right. We saw that when they attacked the Capitol, right? I like Robert Reich's books, R-E-I-C-H, Robert Reich. You know him, the economist. He is. I read whatever he comes out with because he's just, he writes for the average person, and he's so on time, man, and he's so so dedicated, man, to the common good. You know what I mean? And I'm reading his recent book called The System. Got to read it, man. The System. Whoa, it's a deep book, man. The Robert Reich, The System. And I read. I try to read fiction too, because fiction, a good fiction writer, they can open with the way they use words, they just open up the creativity in our minds, Okay. But mostly what I'm reading these days is political stuff and political economy. I'm not an economist. I mean, in the sense of all the quantitative stuff, though I took econometrics and stuff like that. I did go to Rutgers B School. I forgot to tell you that. I just did, a couple semesters. Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of reading that I do. I haven't read anything funny lately, man. I need to.
I'm about to send you.
I watch a lot of Westerns on TV, though.
Yeah.
Please, man. Please.
Note is The Triumph Life of Dr. Kenny D. I think if I use your Columbia address, it'll get to you, right? Oh yeah, man. No question, brother. I would. In fact, I'll text you my home address. Okay. But no, man. I watch a lot of Westerns though. That's how I relax. Okay.
From like Cheyenne starts today. Right. Actually, I think it starts at 6 o'clock. It's gonna come every day 6 o'clock. I watch Gunsmoke religiously. Have Gun Will Travel in the mornings. I watch that. Yeah. And Wanted Dead or Alive, Rawhide. I watch them whenever I can, just to unwind, take me back to my East Orange childhood. Yeah, they still come on this stuff, and what's in some of those movies? Some of those. What's the one about the San Antonio River? It's one there about
it's about, well, anyway, this, you know, it's all about crossing the river. I forget the name of it, but it's like,
there's Red River.
Red River, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Well, what about the Seekers, man? What is the Seekers? The Searchers. The John Wayne.
I haven't seen that one, but
Ooh, it's classic, man. I don't like John Wayne, but that movie is classic, brother. Next time it's on, you got to see the Searchers, man. I've seen it many times.
Well, bro, you've been great, man. Thank you for an hour, man. This has been, I could talk to you for hours and hours. You know, hopefully I'll come up, I could do lunch or something just to shoot, you know, just to rap, you know.
I'd love that, man. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your you know, your consideration during the time of my illness and us trying to get together. I really appreciate it, man. I'd have really been disappointed if we couldn't have gotten together to do this. So thank you.
Thank you, man. I hope the health gets together. We'll be safe in this pandemic. And you got any final words for our audience out there? You want to take us out, and I'll give it to you. Give you free reign.
Yeah, man. Well, your audience is it mostly students, or is it sort of mixed?
It's kind of mixed. It's a young adult, but it's basically, you know, some old heads in there. Definitely some old heads in there. You know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, we are in a war, man. I mean, I didn't want to, you know, to see it, but the right wing has declared war on everyone who does not think like them, which is most Black folk, and you know, we had to pay attention, man, and struggle, man, and you know, support folk who are working for us, and vote, but we got to be diligent, and you know, because this is so very, very dangerous, man. I mean, when you can attack the capital of the United States, that's like being in another country. So this is not the country that you and I grew up in, brother. This is a whole nother world. But, you know, there's still beauty here, man. There's still a lot of good, and we just gotta just grab the good and love it. So
there's always hope. Well, my brother, I keep from the bottom of my heart, man. I love you. Yeah, Sergeant, man, and you know, I'm just gonna say, I'm not. It's very rare that I brag, but I'm gonna brag for both of us. So it ain't just me bragging. We got two Black men from East Orange, top in their profession, PhDs. That's a beautiful thing. Hopefully, folks will honor that and say that that's a product of East Orange.
It's yeah, and it is a product of East Orange. It really is, man. You know. So thank you, brother. God bless
you. Thank you. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for everything.
Oh man, my pleasure.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.